البته آمریکایی‌ها اونهایی که با سیاست‌های این منطقه آشنا هستن میدانند که ورود آمریکا در این قضیه 100% به ضرر اوست. اونچه که او در این زمینه ضربه خواهد خورد به مراتب بیشتر است از اونچه که ایران ممکنه ضربه بخوره.
The world held its breath in the streets of Tehran. Millions gathered, dressed in black, fists raised high under gray skies. But it wasn't just grief filling the air, it was fury. From the most powerful pulpit in the Islamic Republic, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, the supreme leader, is about to make a dot statement the world would never forget. Trump is a clown, he began. And America will regret this crime for generations. This wasn't rhetoric. This was a vow, the target of his rage. The United States of America, and specifically its president at the dot time, Donald J. Trump, the catalyst. A drone strike, thousands of miles away, that had just shaken the foundations of West Asia. On January 3, 2020, a U.S. Reaper drone targeted and killed General Qasem Soleimani, commander of Iran's elite Quds force, the man who orchestrated Iran's proxy strategy across Iraq, Syria, and Lebanon gone in a fireball near Baghdad airport. But this moment wasn't just about Soleimani. It was decades in the making since the 1979 Islamic Revolution. Iran and the US had been locked in a cold, then warm, then near-boiling conflict. The revolution had ousted the American-backed Shah, replacing him with the Islamic Republic, and ever since, both nations have fought a war of shadows, sanctions, proxy wars, cyber attacks. But this was different. This was open. This was direct, and this was personal. Khamenei's speech would become the loudest message ever sent from Iran to Washington. Session 2. Soleimani's death and the regional shock. Qasem Soleimani wasn't just a general in Iran. He was a national hero, a symbol of strength. A man seen not only as a military strategist, but as a moral protector of the Shiite world. For many Iranians, Soleimani represented the country's resistance to American dominance and Israeli expansionism. His body returned to Iran to a reception usually reserved for prophets. Millions poured into the streets in Tehran, Mashhad, and Kerman to weep, to pray, and to vow. Vengeance. Images of women tearing at their veils, old men in tears, children raised on shoulders, waving black banners that read revenge. And then, Khamenei stepped into view. He addressed the funeral, and then the nation seated under portraits of martyrs. Surrounded by top military commanders, he began not with political calculations, but with spiritual gravity. They killed a man who crushed ISIS. They killed a man who stopped terror from spreading to your homes, to your streets, to your children's future. He called Trump a liar, pretending to support Iranian protesters. While tightening sanctions that strangled the economy, he said, Trump speaks of the Iranian people, and yet he sends them pain. He poisons our medicine. He destroys our currency. He denies our children's food and fuel. And then the warning: you assassinated a general, but you awakened a nation. The path of resistance has just begun. Session 3. Khamenei's full warning to Trump. This session was the core of the speech, a direct warning aimed not at generals or diplomats, but at one man, Donald Trump. You are a clown. Khamenei said again, surrounded by liars and thugs. You thought you would stop our revolution, but you have lit a fire you cannot control. He went further. You bombed us from the air. Now our resistance will rise from the earth, from Iraq, from Lebanon, from Yemen, from Syria. You will see us not only in our uniforms, but in the hands of our allies. This wasn't a war. Iran was preparing to fight alone. Khamenei was laying out the strategy. Iran's response would not be a single retaliatory strike. It would be long, asymmetrical, and regional. Then came the ideological. Thrust, this is not a war of armies. This is a war of truth against tyranny. We do not fear your bombs. We do not fear your ships. What we fear is God. And what you should fear is a people who have nothing left to lose. He ended that portion by promising that American military presence in the region would not last. The days of American domination in West Asia are over. And the countdown to your exit, double quotes, has begun. Session 4. Iran responds, missiles and escalation. And then, Iran struck back just 5 days after Soleimani's death on January 8, 2020. Iran launched Operation Martyr Soleimani. Over a dozen ballistic missiles fired at 2 major U.S. bases in Iraq, Al-Asad Air Base and Erbil. It was the first direct state-to-state missile strike against U.S. forces since World War II, as missiles crashed into American-occupied soil. The world stood on edge. Was this the start of a new war? The United States initially reported no casualties, but that story evolved. Weeks later, the Pentagon admitted that over 100 U.S. troops suffered traumatic brain injuries from the dot blasts. The shockwaves weren't just literal. They were geopolitical. Iran had just shown it was willing and able to hit U.S. forces directly, and yet, Tehran stopped short of hitting U.S. embassies or killing American soldiers en masse. This was deliberate. Khamenei's strategy was unfolding. Provoke, not plunge. Burn, not explode. Test resolve, not push the button for full-blown war. At least not yet. Instead, the response would continue in waves. Rocket attacks on green zone compounds, Houthi drone strikes on Saudi oil fields, Hezbollah threats, 2 Israeli installations, Kataib Hezbollah movements in Iraq. It was a chessboard, and every pawn now carried Soleimani's shadow. Session 5. The ideology of resistance. Khamenei's real power was not in tanks or troops. It was in belief in a revolutionary ideology that promised justice through defiance. The supreme leader positioned Soleimani's death not as a defeat, but a divine promotion. A martyr's death, he said. Elevated Iran's mission in speech after speech, sermon after sermon. Khamenei declared Soleimani alive in every fighter, every missile, every resistance movement that stands against oppression. This idea that martyrdom fuels resistance became a rallying cry across the region. Posters of Soleimani went up in Baghdad, in Damascus. In Beirut, he was rebranded as Haj Qasem, the pan-Islamic warrior. Khamenei used this to expand his influence. Lebanese Hezbollah, the Syrian regime, the Houthis, the popular mobilization forces in Iraq, all echoed his message: America must leave the region. The speech had done its job. It wasn't just about grief. It was about galvanizing a cause that outlived any one-man. Session 6. Global fallout and final message. Around the world, leaders scrambled to de-escalate.